King's Church, today is such an exciting day. It's our birthday. It's the day we are celebrating 40 years, our 40th anniversary, 40 years of ministry and life and community and mission, and I could not be more excited for what's about to happen next. We're going to take you on a trip down memory lane. We sat down with some of our founding members. We sat down with our living senior pastors that would serve this church and some of our campus pastors, and we talk about the life of King's Church over the last 40 years. We celebrate the family that God has created here. We celebrate the ministry that God has done, and we look at the mission of God that has been worked through this church community over the last 40 years. You're gonna love it. Sit back and relax and enjoy with gratitude what God has done as we look back over the last 40 years.
So we're going to talk this morning about our church, and we're together here as a group of people that have been around for the long haul. Mm-hmm. We're not the only ones. There's certainly a bunch of others, which is from the get-go we can say is pretty wonderful and pretty maybe rare that here we are fixing to celebrate a 40-year anniversary, and we've got people as a part of the thing and who are still active in the place.
That's right. Yeah.
That were from the beginning. It started 1981, and a group of people got a vision, I guess. Some of you were a part of that group. You were attending church in the city, and out here in the valley, that was all emerging. The people living in the valley and commuting into town and all that was just getting going. And apparently a few people thought, we need a church. Is that how it happened?
I ran into our district superintendent at the time, and he said, what do you think about starting a church out in the valley? And I said, well, it would be great. I said, it's a new area, it's just starting out.
Yeah.
The community is growing very fast.
It was.
And it would be an ideal place to start.
Yep.
How many do you think were a part of that original little cluster of people that were kind of strategizing to do this? Was it 10?
I thought there was 10 families.
10 families.
That's what I thought.
All right. So you got together, I guess at Bert Crozier's home was where the first gathering was?
I believe so, at Bert's.
Were you there? Were you at that?
Yes,
Yeah.
I was, and they were we held the prayer meetings up here first.
Okay.
And they were at Bert, different homes. They were
Okay.
at my place and Bert's place. And
And the prayer was focused on launching,
coming out here if it was the Lord's will
Okay.
to do that.
That's interesting.
That's pretty cool that
Yeah.
it started with prayer meetings happening out here.
Yes.
And so that was July 19th, 1981. And so we began meeting in Lakefield Elementary was where, as I think back, that's where the whole Quispam, a church in Quispam Sis thing came on my radar. They're meeting in Lakefield Elementary.
Lakefield Elementary.
Looking back, let me see, four of you guys remember that because you were there.
Yeah.
Was there like 20 people, 40 people? What do you remember the size of the crowd there in Lakefield?
I would say
I do know.
40 people around.
I do know that by the time you moved into a building, you had around 175 people coming.
Right.
We outgrew the school.
Yeah.
You outgrew it.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very quickly. Very quickly.
And then, of course, bus ministry was a part of this thing from the get-go, right?
Right.
Yeah, that's right.
Our first piece of equipment was
Yeah.
A bus.
a bus.
Yeah. We owned a bus before we owned a building.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good.
I think
Well, Bert headed up the bus route. And the bus route went out Bradley Lake Road, all out around here, around the airport.
Oh,
And he
okay.
would bring the children in.
One of the bus routes from First Wesleyan
Yes,
town. Okay.
the bus. And I went with him one week, and it was amazing how he knew everybody's name.
Right.
Then the doors he knocked on, and the kids that went there, and how old they were, and who their teacher would be, and
Yep.
yeah, he knew all of that.
Yeah.
A year later, in '82, we bought a piece of land up here, a bunch of acreage,
Yeah.
where we still are, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Which again, that's pretty
A year
staggering.
later. Yeah.
Let alone trying to deal with paying a pastor, keeping a bus or two on the road, and all those things. We're were purchasing land. Now, concurrent with that too, there was something that was really rather unusual. We were trying to get funding to build a seniors complex.
That's right.
And that was kind of running concurrently with getting the church started, right? What do you remember about that?
It was the vision of the church, I believe, to have the seniors complex built first.
Okay.
There saw the need, and I think the government was on board with some of the funding, if I remember correct.
Yes, they were.
And that was our first vision, was to have the seniors complex first.
32 apartments?
32 units over there.
And you did that within 2 years of the first meeting at Lakefield Elementary, which is staggering to me. Like, I just think of all the committee meetings and all the, just even securing funding. That was huge.
Yeah.
So they built that, and then at the same time, and this is somewhat unbelievable to me, in those first couple of years, the church is already strategizing about building a building.
But there's a lot of vision and forward motion.
You're
right
not
there.
kidding.
Like, those things don't happen because you sit around and talk about it. A lot of doers sitting around that table, isn't
Yeah, because we started in 81, and then 83, 2 years later was an incredible year because you completed the manor, and a few months later you had your first service in the new church
In November?
in November.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you built this building, but you hired the manor. That was built by a construction company, but the church was built by a construction company, but there was a ton of sweat equity, right?
That's
That's
right.
right.
Yeah, Chapel Stone was the project managers, and we were the contractors.
The church was?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's
And,
interesting.
Yeah.
So everybody had a hand in this whole deal.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody.
Yeah. Didn't people even take some of their vacation time to
Really?
dedicate
We did,
Yes.
yes.
We
dedicated
did.
to the building?
Oh my
Yeah,
goodness.
Laurel did
Yeah.
too, I remember. Yeah. Took vacation week and 2 weeks or whatever and just worked at the church.
Yeah.
So, I mean, how was all that happening? Why were people doing that?
Well, they're probably doing it because the whole thing that we haven't talked about, but the whole thing is based on prayer and belief that this is what God wanted us to do.
Okay.
And if He provides a way, which was us, we needed to step up to it. And
Wow.
God honored it, I think,
Wow.
and still is.
If He provides a way, which was us.
Yes.
Love that, Linda. That's amazing.
We were the tools.
You were the way.
Yeah.
Contractors,
good.
yes, but tools, yes.
Yeah.
It is exciting when you think that prayer is what moved the whole thing,
Yes. Totally.
and faith in God. Believing that what He has told us, because as you have said, on paper, it's not realistic, it couldn't happen.
Just the timeline, let alone raising the funds. I know that there was debt. I mean, we went into debt with the manor, but the government was CMHC was backing it.
Yeah.
Yes.
But the debt to build this building, I mean, our first building was a pretty incredible building at the time.
At the
It
time.
was.
Brick
Yes.
exterior, and I mean, it was big for the day.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we get this new building up, and then there's a pastoral change.
Yes.
Jack and Pauline Fancy become the new pastors,
Right.
Yes.
and so those I'm just trying to nail years. Those were like
Oh,
85 to 90 in that range there, late 80s.
probably.
Yeah.
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 Probably.
What, like, were you paying your bills? What was going on that way? Were you
Well, we really got in quite deep problems.
Really?
And I remember we had a board meeting one night, and of course that was the main topic. And the thing was, we were getting into deep trouble.
Yeah. And a desperation.
And
It
yes,
was,
Like,
it
is that
was.
would
Like
that
that, there was
capture
a
a little
week,
bit?
it was really intense.
then it gets resolved in a pretty unexpected
yeah,
way.
Miraculous.
Yeah.
miraculous,
Miraculous way.
What happened?
a godsend.
That somebody
We were given, I think it was $850,000 was the number that was mentioned by
Yeah.
a lady
Yeah.
in the community who,
850,000.
that was a lot of money back
Yes,
then.
so-
Dawn. And we had a week to raise raise funds, because I think they were going to foreclose on us, if I
Really,
remember
that
right.
word was being kicked around.
It
So
was.
at the beginning of that week, you didn't know about the 850,000.
We didn't know, and
Wow.
and she didn't even come to our church. She was friends of someone that was connected somehow to our church. Realized her
didn't Fred
situation.
Whitty visit her?
Yes, he
Well,
was
I
the
heard
first
stories
contact.
about a baptism happening in her pool. They
Yes,
used,
my daughter was baptized in her
okay,
pool.
so that was kind of the contact.
Sue was baptized in
Yeah,
that
that's
pool.
how it really got started with
Isn't
her.
that something?
Yeah.
Fred needed a place to baptize
to have
the
a
people,
baptism.
and
Yeah.
she had the pool.
And she had an indoor pool.
Right.
So God,
Yep.
No.
God, He knows where the resources
Isn't
are.
that something?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know.
And-
It's just like,
So
That was a miracle.
that gift, like you guys went from one reality to another. Suddenly,
Within a week.
I came across a document recently that was talking. They were letters of thanks written from different groups to Kings Valley, thanking them for the generous financial donation. You know,
And
Yeah.
and
like
it was
weeks before, they would be.
yeah, we went from
We don't have anything.
thinking the door was going to be
Wow.
padlocked to suddenly we're in a position of feeling God's been so good to us, we got to start giving some of this away.
Yeah.
And I know
That's
Cadence
amazing.
Island got a big donation, and Kingswood and the Gideons, and I think the church, I think they gave $30,000 to the Atlantic District
Wow.
in that process.
Yeah. And I think we gave money to River Valley too. They were just getting started.
Oh, really? To the
Okay.
new church over there.
I think we did.
And this is when you and Janet came on the scene.
1990 was when we
Okay.
came, yeah.
Yeah.
But it was a year or two after the
Right.
financial weight lifted,
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we were in a position then, like now we're a church that is 9 years old. When I came, we're a church that's 9 years old, and we've got a beautiful building, and we're pretty well out of the water, out of the mud financially, and we've got a staff. It was like we're ready to roll, so to speak.
Yeah. And we were shifting into a time in the light in the church in general, and at least in the Western world, that was shifting too.
Absolutely.
The church life was changing, coming into the 90s.
A lot of creativity was
Yep.
showing up. In
How do we make the gospel and church accessible to everybody,
Yeah.
right? So it was a neat time to be a brand new, the new kid on the block,
Yep.
because people were looking for new creativity and
Well, there's a music upheaval going on.
yep, yeah,
You know,
Yeah.
I mean, those are the. It seems even funny to talk about now, but like shifting away from singing out of a hymn book
yep,
to an overhead projector or a slide. You know,
yes, yeah,
that was controversial
Yes,
in
it
itself,
was.
Yeah.
right?
yeah. We want to sing hymns from the hymn book,
Yeah,
Period.
yeah,
not just a hymn on an overhead slide. We want it in the hymnal. We want
Yeah.
to turn in the page. Yeah,
yeah.
Absolutely.
Drums are showing up, guitars are showing up, right? Those.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it was. So they were. I recall them as being. I mean, those were exciting years, but they were pretty controversial years too.
Yeah.
You know, we were moving to. The church used to have those big king and queen chairs on the platform.
Yeah.
Oh yes.
You know, with the big
And the
giant-
big communion table up front.
Yeah, and a pulpit that you could have had the Last Supper around, like really.
But what I remember of those times is that when these new concepts and ideas were put before our people, yes, there was discussion about it. Yes, some of us had trouble with it. But the congregation very quickly got on board with
The
it.
greater good was kind of
Absolutely. And that's the thing that has always impressed me about this place.
Yes.
Is that we always seem to be willing to set aside our petty differences and our preferences
Yeah.
and move toward seeing people understand what Jesus is.
Sure.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, there's always been a sense here that Jesus is about what's next.
Right.
Yes, yes.
And so if we weren't sure what God's will was, we would ask, God, what's next?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we were sure He'd give us something.
And it was breaking, I think King's Church was breaking down the church walls. I was in protest, not in protest. I was like, we're doing what? We're taking the pews out of the church?
Yeah.
There's no communion table? But that was God's way of saying, I love all my people. I want the wall's broken down. I'm approachable. And I remember conversation with you, Don, with the ashtrays outside the front doors. And I was livid.
Yeah.
Livid. And I'm thinking, do I want my children to come to my how can this, what in that? But that says that we are all equal in God's sight.
That's right.
Wow.
And as you say, bringing them in for other activities, we're all just people.
Yeah.
It's whether we are accepting Jesus and committing to follow his way.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it isn't always a street of gold.
Yeah.
We have to walk it.
In today's thinking in King's Church, that doesn't seem like radical thinking, but at the time, when
the
you're
time.
moving from traditional to non-traditional,
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
I was just thinking, we were the only church that I ever heard had their own ice fishing shack. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Yeah, that's right.
But that was driven out of a desire to
Yeah.
what can we
Yes.
be doing that people can connect
Yeah.
here before they.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think
I forgot about it.
Yeah, we
I
did.
did too.
it's interesting because it seemed like in the community out here, people are also very interested in building culture. So when you and Janet were leading us in the productions, but also inspiring us to find whatever ways we can to have the community come into this place and realize, hey, these are normal people.
Yeah. Seems to me there was emerging in the church at large, and certainly here at King's Church, this feeling that we want to be seen as people that have something to offer
Yeah.
to normal, real people.
Yeah,
like
relevant,
there's a place
yeah.
for you here.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
I just had a thought of a plaque that was over the door. It kind of typified what we were all about, and it was. I think I
as you
can't
were
quote
leaving?
it.
I think I know.
know what you're gonna
You're
say.
moving into your mission field as you exited the.
You are
door.
now
You are now entering the mission field.
I was at the
Yeah.
back of the worship
Yes.
tent, right?
Yes,
Yes.
you are now entering the mission
Yeah.
field. That's what exactly
Yeah.
it said.
And that explains.
Yeah.
Is the word ethos? Is that the correct word
Yeah.
of what the church was?
And that had been there from the beginning in its
Yeah.
own way,
Yeah.
but it was taken on. I mean, we weren't inventing it because it was happening all across the evangelical world.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
The vision thing, though, too, has been a big deal. Like, one of my favorite memories was when the building was being built, the carpet wasn't installed. And of course, it was carpet with the athletic lines cut in the carpet, so we
Yeah.
could literally play basketball and volleyball and stuff. But do you remember before the carpet was laid down, people coming in
Yep.
and writing the names?
That was in the foyer, wasn't it?
foyer and
And
up
here.
in here.
And here too?
One of them were what we're believing God for was in one of the rooms.
Scripture.
When the scripture was the other one. Like how did they go? Like
Well, I
what?
think
And out in the foyer is
Where the names were.
of people we were praying for.
yes.
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
what. Yeah, names. So out there under that carpet
Under-
would be
Under the tile
What it
now
was
would be
it?
people's names.
people's names,
Yep.
and in here were scriptures. We were.
Scriptures.
Yeah, I just remember, people on their hands and knees with markers
Yes.
writing those things down. Yeah.
That's profound.
Yeah. Great memories, great years. Like I was thinking this morning, I was here in through the 90s and the early 2000s. Nothing but good memories, really.
Yeah.
And the best of those memories for me is feeling like what we were doing, you were doing in partnership with
Yeah.
the church family.
Yeah.
It was a real team.
Arms were linked
Yeah.
together.
Yeah, which you was there in the beginning, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Bert used to knock on doors, and as I said, I went with him once. But if I had a dime for every door he knocked on, I'd be living in a
Yeah.
castle.
Really. Yeah.
He had that goal, the desire to reach
out.
others.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The mission. The
Yeah.
mission,
Yep. Which is still
here.
man. Yeah. Still central to the whole
Yes.
deal. Much appreciated, and glad you're still around.
Me too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Heaven's next.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Got a lot of people up there that we're part of.
Don't we, eh?
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, welcome, guys. Thank you guys for coming and being here today. Let's chat for a few minutes, shall we?
Sounds good.
Let's have a conversation. Let's have some fun. A little trip down memory lane. Let's do introductions really quick. Okay. So, clockwise, we've got what's your name again? Seth Fancy.
Yes.
Seth Fancy.
Seth Fancy, that's right.
Halifax
campus lead pastor.
location pastor.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And then we've got Dan Lamus, who this is your second appearance in the video.
Yeah.
So Adam Brewer, who is our West location campus pastor, which is awesome. Anthony Moore, another associate pastor, does prophetic and prayer and all sorts of awesome stuff.
Things.
Yep, as we all do. And Johnny Robertson, who's our Charlottetown location pastor, our most recent location. Just started this year, actually.
Just started.
Which is awesome. And I'm Andy Broad, and I'm the executive pastor at King's Church. So here's what we want to do. So we've heard a little bit of history, like Dan was saying, a little bit of in the life of our church, which has been really rich. I'd love it if we could chat about like the last decade of ministry. None of us, with the exception, I believe, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, none of us with the exception of Dan were on staff before the last decade. Some of us were around, maybe attending and things like that on the peripheral, but none of us were on staff in our current roles before the last 10 years. So during the Move campaign is when we became, we moved from being a local church to a regional church. And that's when it is awesome. And to think back on those days is pretty wild.
Is that when we shifted from Kings Valley to King's Church?
Yeah, that's when we rebranded, when we changed our name. Now we had launched our first location, like on the east side of St. John, in I think 2013. We figured that out, wasn't it?
Yeah.
2013 it was, and so that was kind of our first dipping our toes in the pool of the multi-site model and sort of spreading beyond just one location and one building. But it was in that Move campaign in 2016 where we rebranded and we had a whole new vision for where our church was headed, and a vision that sort of Pastor Brent had received from the Lord and then brought it to the church and brought it to us, those of us who were around at the time. So we launched East in 2013. That was our first like multi-site model, and then we did the Move campaign in 2016, totally rebranded, became like a much larger, more intentional multi-site movement. And then we launched West Side of St. John and Halifax, and also making a lot of changes and shifts at the Valley, which had sort of been like the established church that we were like sort of transitioning into, like what it meant to be part of a multi-site movement and not just one local body anymore. Like there was a lot that was happening in the fall of 2017, and then you would have came in right around that same time.
Yeah,
too.
you already spring of 2017. Yeah, you just before.
Yeah,
just came on. So part of it. And we participated in as the campus as well. So we did a fall festival around it. It was pretty cool, man.
The fall.
We just moved into Bayside Middle School. And that was amazing. Yeah, totally. I think about Pat Lasky during that time as well, man. Like he was such an amazing.
That's right.
Yeah, he was like we afterwards we coined it the Lasky effect because he was just such an incredible partner. Like he was a fantastic guy and huge supporter and total outstanding experience with him.
When I think back on history, first of all, it's crazy to think that this is all, the things that we've talked about here today have all happened within the last 10 years, 8 to 10 years really, which is actually kind of insane, like how much transformation and change and really growth and evolution our church has gone through. And we've changed a lot in a very short period of time. But it's
in the last 5, it's just
incredible.
The last 2.
That's true.
It's like what you were saying about Pat Lasky was a principal at Bayside, which was one of our very first, or very early on multi-site endeavors, to think of some of those kind of strategic ally relationships really that the Lord went before us in formatting and building a lot of these things, because there was what the real marker of this season has been of anything, which has just been a continuation of what this church was built on, was just stepping out in faith. But at the same time, like the Lord has always gone before us and given us those kind of strategic partnerships, key relationships, right?
Yeah, totally.
But I know all of you guys could point to like key relationships.
Same thing in the schools. The schools where the principals were just awesome, like Michelle on the West Side. But you probably initiated that relationship. You and Robin would have, I think. Yeah. And she was fantastic, just doing everything they could to help. It's really neat in the campuses because you're able to, in the schools, like they're not ideal places, and all of us would say schools are tough, but amazing. They were good. But how often does the janitor or the custodian come to your church service when you're not in a school? We all have those stories. All of us baptizing them.
Strategic partnerships everywhere. I mean, I think for us in Halifax, like it's been Like I think of the coffee shops and some of the places that we've been. Absolutely. Like our first interest night was at a coffee shop, the first coffee shop I ever walked into in Halifax.
Yeah.
Looked around, I thought the place was such a nice place. I said the owner was working, and I said, can I do an interest night here? And they look at me and they were like, what's an interest night? I'm like, I don't know, we'll find out. But I'd like to do one here, right? Cortado tasting room. And you know what they did is they took a chance on us, and they shut down the entire coffee house for us. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And they gave us a flat rate, and they made whatever our people wanted. Since then, we launched in a school just around the corner from it, and every single Sunday they made coffee for our campus. Yeah. And so we had this growing relationship with them, and you look back and you wouldn't have been able to do some of the things without some of those strategic partnerships that we didn't have until we actually stepped into it by faith. Like this happens in real time.
Yeah. It's amazing just some of the credibility in the community as well. Like when I was still at West St. John, just before I came to Charlottetown, I think we were doing Growth Track. And I called ahead for Starbucks, a West Side St. John Starbucks, and I said, hey, I need to order coffee for 100 people. And so anyway, I showed up at Starbucks and I said, hey, my name's Johnny, I'm here to pick up coffee for 100 people. And they're like, hey, what's that for? Where's the event at? And I said, it's at Seaside Park Elementary School. And the lady stopped and she paused and she looked at me and she said, hey, is that like a Seaside Park Elementary thing, or is that a King's Church thing? And I'm like, it's a King's Church thing. She paused for a second. She said, in that case, this is on us.
Which is a really cool tie-in, because the West Campus was really birthed out of a prayer group that started, like a small group that started
meeting at
Starbucks.
That's
where that came
from. For a year before. And
that's cool.
Yeah. 6 people got together the first night there.
Wow.
And I said, okay, we're about to plant a church in West St. John. What do you think it should look like? And we just talked about it that night and prayed into it. And
you guys met weekly.
Yeah, we did.
For a long time. Yeah.
It was awesome. When we stop and think about the lives that have been impacted because of what now exists at this table. Because I know none of us would sit here and say, well, it's amazing this has all been super fun and super easy. Last 10 years. No one's going to say that. Yeah. But then we weighed against some of the things that we've seen God do and some of the stories and the life change.
And I think there was just a sense as we stepped into this particular season that we were part of something so much bigger than ourselves. Yeah. And I think that was a real desire of our hearts to actually be part of something like that.
One of the key things in the Move campaign that I think really unleashed something was, and you kind of touched on it, was that we are a move of God. Yeah. We're not waiting for a move of God. The church is a move of God. That's right. Yeah. And that really flips and switches on for all of us, I believe. So whether we're dealing with, a school principal or a support staff, or, an entrepreneurial, a business person in a coffee shop, we see them as all part of what God's doing.
That's right.
So I think part of why people want to be part of it is they just sense a core belief about us that, hey, if you're here living and breathing, God has got something for you to plug into, and we're actually glad to involve you. We don't see you as other than us. The other thing I don't want to miss either is the role of prayer in all of these things. Just us learning that none of this is going to happen without prayer. Everything has to be rooted and just soaked in prayer.
That's it right there too, because I think it's not just rolling up your sleeves and making phone calls and pounding the pavement. Right. It's actually all of that, which is really tangible, but the work done in prayer is the work done in the unseen. And to me, that is a often overlooked, because you could just say, oh, those guys they just made this great team and they just did all these things and that's great. Mm-hmm. But to overlook the investment and the time spent in the place of prayer would be like a gross oversight. It's such a joy, but it is a significant part of our story. At every step of the way, that the groundwork has been done on the pavement, but also in the place of prayer.
Yeah. I'm thankful. I'm thankful for this team. I'm thankful for these friendships and my brothers. This represents not all of, but many of the leading voices in our church in this season. And everybody who's been a leading voice in this church for the last 40 years hasn't been as concerned with what the world thought we should do or what the
That's
world
right.
thought the requirement should be, but it was like, what do we feel God is leading us into?
Yes.
Something I really appreciate about Brent's leadership is we don't do what we do just because church world tells us to do this or that either. You know, this priority of listening for God,
Yes.
you know, it's beautiful to live according to what God says to you, but hey, you're never quite sure what he's going to say.
Yeah, that's
And the things he might direct you to do may not really, it might go against the grain of what church world says too and be unconventional. And I so value that in King's Church.
Yes.
The willingness to do something because we believe God's saying to do it. Even if down the road we might find out, well, I'm not so sure we heard him exactly right. But the boldness to step in anyway on the faith that he's speaking to us and we're going to do this thing, that is an unsung part of our story.
Right.
What God celebrates, we take time to celebrate.
That's right.
You know, we really try to go with the rhythms of what God is saying and doing. And I've seen Brent do that a number of times over the past decade, and I so value that. That's a rare thing.
Guys, before we finish, best job we ever had?
Yeah, best job.
Best job we ever had.
Best job we ever had.
No joke.
For real. Sure. Yeah. Awesome.
You know, one of the things I've been very aware of over the last handful of years as I've been the senior pastor here is just this whole thing is bigger than me, and it's bigger than you. It's bigger than there's something God has done here in this church that has taken a whole community of people and leaders over the last 40 years to accomplish what God has done in this incredible story. And you know, for those who don't know who's here with me right now, we have 4 of the 5 senior pastors in the history of King's Church. And why don't you tell everybody your name and the years that you served here as senior pastor. So let's start with our founder, Mr. Fred.
My name is Fred Whitty. I was 45 years of age when God began to move on me. I was in Woodstock pastoring for 10 years. The district wanted me to go to build a new church or a new location. And I said, well, I'll reluctantly go and talk to the group. I came home about midnight and I said to my wife, honey, we're leaving.
But so you came here, God grabbed your heart. What years did this all start for you, and when did you
Now, 45 years ago, what is that?
Yeah, 1981.
1981 till 5 years. I was here 5 years.
40 years ago, from 81 to 86.
Right.
You got things going. And then after you,
after
Pastor Jack Fancy came. And Jack was here 86 till, do you remember, Don?
Well, he was here. I came in 90 to serve on the staff
with him,
and he was here off and on for a few years post-retirement. You know, still involved.
Yeah, he was a huge supporter. I remember just.
He was. Jack Fancy led me to the Lord when I was 12 years old in Blacks Harbor, New Brunswick.
Wow.
And he was pastoring there at the time.
I did not know
that.
that.
And then, of course, knowing he was retired here and having kept in touch with him, that was a big draw for me, was to be around him.
And you came here in 2006.
2008.
2008. Yeah, I came
2012. Yeah.
We're getting all our wires crossed.
Yeah.
So Don, you started here in 1990.
I came as a worship pastor, but I've been at Caton's Island. Thought I'd be there the rest of my life. Really, I thought I was born on the planet to do it. Pastor Jack reached out. Had the privilege of working with him for a bunch of years.
Ministry is a grind, and it's not just for the pastor. For any person in the church that's involved at a meaningful level, it just costs you. It's a grind, and you know, I get thinking about that, and yet there are moments we have as pastors and as churches where it's like that makes it all worth it. And I want to read to you in the ledger. I came across this. And this was early on. They record the first person to ever accept Christ. It was in Lakefield Elementary School still. You guys weren't even in a building. It said, Ken Craig came to the altar that evening at a service, and he made his commitment to Christ. The group had been praying for him for a long time at every prayer meeting. And then it said this, if nothing else happened, it all would have been worthwhile just to have Ken Craig saved.
Wow.
What, can you guys recall a moment, you know, off the top of your head where you had just man, this has been a pain, but it's also been a beautiful thing that's unfolding? Let's call it it was worth it moment.
One widow lady said to me, "Why are you building a senior citizens for us? And you don't even have a church." And I said, "The reason we're building it is for people like you, because we're concerned for you." This same lady, she said to me, "Pastor, I'm an Anglican." I said, "I don't care." I said, "I'm here to help to draw you closer to Jesus." And that was the beginning of sowing the seed in this woman's life. She lost her only daughter 2 years previous. Nobody ever visited her. I was the first pastor. And it was so exciting to see the Lord working in her life. She had a pool in her home for her daughter who died of leukemia. And I said, "We're having a baptism. And we don't have a place to have for baptism. And would you let us have the pool for baptism?" She said, "Pastor, whatever I have, you can have it, because I hear what you're saying to me."
It's awesome.
And tears were coming down her face. I built a pool for my daughter. Now the church is using my pool to baptize something I've never experienced before. That woman ended up donating to this church $875,000 when she died.
And Don, did I caught the end of the years where this church really became known for evangelistic outreach events. And I was just floored by the amount of investment from you guys and the team of people here at the church that had for years carried that. Yeah. Do you have any thoughts or any memories of just, that was worth it?
Well, when you mentioned the teamwork, I mean, whether it was, when we moved in this building, we were able to have a sit-down dinner for 500 people. Well, we were doing those in an outreach context.
Right.
We advertised a midwinter cruise. People thought we were actually selling tickets to a real cruise. It was like we were recreating the vibe here.
Yeah.
We were exposing the church and just our angle on things, the evangelical way of doing church to people. And productions in those earlier years were a big part of that. For me, the highlight was you were able to present the gospel to people that weren't in the habit of ever hearing the gospel much. In the early 2000s, those seasonal events were kind of fading.
Yeah. But
there was a move to making Sunday,
the event.
Yeah, Sunday became the event.
Yeah.
And so we were doing dramas in the service, and there was some dance happening and a lot of instrumentation. And as that was happening, Sunday became the focus.
Yes.
Instead of those events.
And then when you moved out to Moncton for a season, you came in and really, like, one of the big, we talk about sacrifice and paying the price. One of the big things I look back on your time here and being in this with you at that time is, change is hard. Like, and no one likes it when it's happening, even though it's necessary. And you really had to lead the way and put a lot of relational equity in, especially with that small army of people that had been, harvesting massive amounts of fruit for a decade.
And that was their identity in the church too, right?
And that shifted, and so you had to navigate some real hard waters there for those few years, like of just setting the, resetting the foundation of our church, on the main things again.
That's right.
Like having people, in its season we did these productions, and now it's shifting again. And
it's so funny because I remember in those early days, the board had already said just what Don said. They were all realizing that the event-driven model just wasn't translating anymore.
Yep.
So we came in, and you're right. I mean, it has always been a church that kept up with the times, that made the sacrifices, that took the steps that were necessary to reach the culture that we're living in. And we did a lot of those changes, but you're right. I think a lot of our older people, like all of us do, got comfortable with, you know, the 90s and the early 2000s, and we were moving out of that. And it was another sacrifice, another shift. But they made it. They made the shift. I remember Stan Constantine saying, "Pastor, we trust you, and if you're saying this is what we need to do, we're behind you."
Yeah. And that's been present in our church, like the core of our church, like especially I think some of our seniors and stuff. We obviously have had challenges as leaders, but you hear some of the horror stories of worship wars and churches that just want to get stuck. And like our church has just never been about that. You know, I think about Psalm 1 where it talks about, you know, the righteous are like trees planted by streams of water. Their leaf doesn't wither and they bear fruit in their season. And our church has figured out, you know, how to stay rooted in every season and trust God with the fruitfulness of it in its season. But I wanted to read some stats to you guys, you know, give you some numbers. You know, since Ken Craig and that first person to accept Jesus, and since 1981, we have seen 1,261 people baptized, not including this year. So that's just effective 2020.
Wonderful.
1,261 people, you know, since the pool party have been baptized here. You think, man, if we could get a snapshot of all those people going under and coming up. But then you have decisions made since Ken Craig, with all those productions, Sunday services, 5,462 people's names.
They will know you by your fruit, like your fruit. And it's amazing to think of the fruit over the years. I remember the first time attending this church as a student, and that night, many people came to Christ.
That's the exponential potential in a seed, right?
Yeah.
And when you think of everybody's contribution, you know, you give or you serve or you pray or you share, it's not just about what's happening in that moment, it's about the combined ripple effect of that contribution.
And it's amazing to see over the decades the different modes of operation, the different flavors to do the very same thing, bringing people to the feet of Jesus so they can make a decision and make him Lord of their lives. It's powerful.
When we go back to 1981,
nobody could have guessed.
Nobody could have guessed. Like other than you know, it says right in the beginning, Hebrews 1. All we know is this: without faith, it is impossible to please God.
Amen.
But you have got to believe that He is, and that He is a rewarder of those who will diligently seek Him.
Yeah.
I mean, we know that, and we know that is still true right now, and we got 40 years of evidence that that is true.
Yeah.